Alright mates, how's it going? In today's video, chapter 17 of Rise of the Horde by Christy Golden. Let's just go. Durotan lifted his head and sniffed. There was a scent in the air, one he couldn't quite place. Kind of like something was burning, but it wasn't that. Once upon a time, he could have turned to Drekthar and asked him what the smell was. And Drekthar could have used his shaman powers to ask the air for information and details. But not anymore. Not now that Drekthar and the others were warlocks. It hadn't rained for a while, and this summer seemed hotter than usual. In fact, it was the second summer in a row where there'd been hardly any rain, and Durotan constantly found himself walking around with swamp ass. On a whim, the Frostwolf chieftain dug his fingers into the soil beneath him, and found that it was sandy and dusty. It wasn't the fertile soil he was used to. Nothing was going to grow in this shit. Draka then approached and gave Durotan a big old hug, and they stood like that for a bit before she released him.
We've never relied that much on what we could grow anyway. We've depended on what we could hunt, mostly. But the animals we hunt survive on what the earth provides. We're all connected. The shaman knew that.
One of the younger warlocks hurried past and Draka fell silent. The little thing then turned to look at Draka and smiled, showing a mouthful of pointed, nasty teeth. And Draka couldn't help but shudder.
I received another letter. We must all prepare for a long march. We are to leave our lands.
You what, mate?
Blackhand's orders. He's relocated to this new citadel, and he wants his army there with him. It's no longer enough for us to join together to attack. Now we must all live together and be ready to follow wherever Blackhand leads us.
Draka stared at him incredulously, before quickly reading the scroll itself.
Guess we'd better prepare then.
And then she walked off, and as Durotan watched her leave, his heart ached once again. As the Frostwolves observed the citadel for the first time, they were stopped dead in their tracks. And whilst many around him murmured things like, "Look at the size of it," and "It's bloody impressive, that is," Durotan found himself thinking, "That is a bloody eyesore and out of harmony with everything we are." The design of the citadel almost seemed alien. There was nothing orcish about it. Draka and Durotan then exchanged a silent glance. Were they the only ones left who saw this for the monstrosity it truly was? But the Frostwolf clan continued forward, and proximity to the fortress did nothing to make it seem more attractive. More buildings came into view and they too looked dark and ugly. Members of the Blackrock clan greeted the Frostwolves and directed them to the designated part of the complex, so they began setting up tents and stuff. And when dusk came, Durotan received a summons for he and a number of his clan to head to the courtyard, and so they did. They heard the drums first, causing Durotan to tense up a bit. They'd been specifically instructed not to bring any weapons, and that was about all they'd been told, so things were starting to feel a bit ominous. The drums came closer, and the earth beneath Durotan's feet started to vibrate, which was also a little bit concerning. However, two Blackrock riders then came into view looking really pleased with themselves.
"Do not fear, proud members of the Horde. Our new allies, brought into our ranks by the mighty Blackhand, are approaching. Welcome them."
The new allies then appeared, and Durotan's jaw dropped. Ogres. What the hell?
"We will crush the Draenor. Crush, crush, crush."
For a sick, dizzying moment, Durotan was but a child again, fleeing from such a monster. And the next thing Durotan saw in his mind's eye was his father, smashed and broken. Orcs were now fighting alongside monstrous, feeble-brained creatures in an effort to destroy an intelligent, peaceful race. World had gone mad, Durotan thought. Life doesn't make any sense anymore. Meanwhile, Velen shuddered. His assistant attempted to offer him a nice soothing brew, but he waved it away. A beverage wasn't going to come for him. Telmore had fallen, and with the city, his dear friend Restalan. And that news was only made more painful by the revelation of how it had happened. Velen had truly believed there was something special about Durotan, and the fact that the Frostwolf chieftain had let him go, rather than hand him over to Nazul, had only served to confirm his faith. But it turns out, Durotan's an asshole. He and Orgrim were the only two orcs that had ever witnessed how the green stone protected the city. Couldn't possibly have been anyone else. There was even worse news about the attack as well. Only a handful had escaped and fled to the Temple of Karabor, and they did not bring word of simple bows and arrows, of spears and axes. They also spoke in hushed voices of greenish bolts of terrible pain, of torment beyond anything imaginable, of little creatures gibbering at the feet of those who wielded this magic. They spoke of Minari. This at least helped Velen to finally understand what the balls was going on. The abrupt attacks from the Orcs, their advancements of technology and skill, the fact that they'd turned their backs on their own religion, was just like back home. The Orcs were nothing more than pawns, being used by Kil'jaeden in his endless pursuit of the exiled ones. If this had happened anywhere else, the response would have been pretty straightforward. Velen would gather his people, and they would run away. But that wasn't going to be possible. The ship had crashed. Kore was dying, and they liked it here. This was their home now. However, that didn't stop Velen from grasping his favourite purple crystal and desperately pleading for guidance from the dying Naru.
Kore, old friend, I miss your wisdom.
Gul'dan looked around the room and felt really proud of himself. Everything was going as planned. His Shadow Council had been formed, and Gul'dan felt pretty confident that he'd chosen well. They were all eager to turn their backs on their own people, and Blackhand was still foolishly under the impression that he was part of it, despite the fact that the real meetings always took place after he'd been dismissed.
Greetings. How are the various clans reacting to the idea of ogres as allies? Kargath, let's start with you.
They are primed for bloodshed. They don't care who helps them slit Draenor throats open. Laughter filled the room as many of the council nodded in agreement. I have heard protests from some in the White Claw clan, and Durotan of the Frostwolves still bears watching.
Do not fear. I have had Durotan in mind for some time. Why has he not been eliminated? It would be easy to replace him with another, more in line with our plans. He's constantly disagreeing with everything. That is precisely why I still need him alive. He is known for a more moderate stance. When he does finally go along, anyone else who might have had doubts goes with him. But what if there comes a time when he does not agree? A line he's not willing to cross? Then we will deal with him, in a way that best advances our power without placing it at risk, as we always do.
Gul'dan then leaned forward, as if to say now it's time for the real business.
Speaking of those who have reservations, I have heard that there are some who continue to try and contact the elements and the ancestors.
One of the members of the council shifted uneasily. I've tried to dissuade them, but I don't see how I can punish them for it. It was the belief that the ancestors wanted us to attack the Draenor that made this whole thing possible in the first place.
That is the bait that hooked them, but that is no longer necessary. We must make sure that there is no turning back. We've been lucky in our campaign, and with the ogres, success is likely to continue. But if there are any setbacks, any battles that go poorly, then those who still hold shamanism close to their hearts may find an appreciative ear. It would be unfortunate if for some reason the ancestors were actually able to communicate with their descendants.
Gul'dan then glanced at Nazul. It had only been when that loser had travelled to the Sacred Mountain that he'd learned the truth. The illusion had fooled even him, a very powerful shaman, right up until that point. So therefore, the answer seemed pretty simple. Seal the goddamn mountain and be done with it. And we're leaving it there! There's only 5 chapters left of this story, plus a prologue, and then I'm probably going to do The Last Guardian, because it's pretty much the only book that takes place during the First War, but also it'll mix things up a bit, because it's mostly human stuff. And then we'll do Tides of Darkness after that. Link in the description if you're interested in buying the book, as well as for my Discord and my Patreon too. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!